Hello and welcome to this ISM Trust webinar on safeguarding for musicians who work with children. I'm Ruth McPherson, Head of Charity Development at the ISM, and I'm delighted to be joined by our Director of Legal Services, Stuart Darke. Stuart oversees the work of the ISM's specialist in-house legal team, and after graduating from the London School of Economics with a degree in government and economics, he went on to train as a barrister. He's also worked as a civil servant and as an official for a teachers' trade union before joining us at the ISM. Before we begin the webinar, just a few things to note. During the presentation, please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer these at the end. And do keep an eye on the chat box where we'll be dropping in some useful links as we go. If you experience any technical difficulties, let us know in the chat box and we'll attempt to resolve them. And if you wish to use them, subtitles are available to enable at the bottom of your screen. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll share the recording with you afterwards, as well as a feedback survey, which we'd be very grateful if you'd fill out. Feedback helps us to improve our future services and our future webinars. So the ISM Trust, which is hosting the webinar, is the ISM's sister charity, and the Trust offers high quality professional development to everyone working in music. Through the ISM Trust, the ISM gives back to the sector and supports and empowers music professionals to succeed. We produce award-winning events, training and resources, which are largely completely free for musicians and music professionals to access. So now, without any further ado, I'm very pleased to hand over to Stuart, who's going to cover the fundamentals of safeguarding for musicians, including the legal background, examples of good safeguarding practice, how to access a criminal record check, and a guide to the ISM's safeguarding requirements. So thank you very much, and over to you, Stuart.
Thanks very much, Ruth. Can I welcome everyone as well to this webinar this afternoon. As Ruth said, I'm Stuart Darke. I'm the Director of Legal Services at the ISM, and I'm also the ISM's designated safeguarding person. Obviously, Ruth has said about dropping any questions into the Q&A. I hopefully will be able to answer those at the end if we've got enough time. If anything needs a bit more of a considered response, then I may well take a bit of time just to come back to you at a slightly later date, but I will come back to you. Right, let's move on with the presentation. So what am I going to be talking about today? Well, in this session, I'm going to be talking about safeguarding for musicians. And I'm going to concentrate this afternoon on working with children. There is much of what I'm going to say that equally applies if you're working with vulnerable adults as well, especially when it comes to the general principles, but there's probably a little bit too much to go through in one session. If a session on vulnerable adults is something that you'd like, then pop it on the feedback form when you fill it in. And Ruth and I will talk about whether we put on one of these that covers specifically about vulnerable adults as well. But today we're really going to do cover through the areas, 6 areas covered on this slide. First of all, I'm going to give a general overview of safeguarding and child protection and some definitions of words which are used in when discussing these subjects. Then I'm going to look at some of the practical issues to help you with good practice in safeguarding. Next, I'll run through the various criminal records checks that can be done in order to ensure that children are safeguarded when coming into contact with adults. Then it's important to know what to do when any safeguarding issues arise. So we'll then look at some practical measures to help you if a child discloses anything to you, and also who you should report those things to. Sometimes allegations are made against those working as music professionals, and we'll cover this point too. Then we'll also look at for ISM members and the fact that they're bound by certain policies and procedures as a condition of their membership, and I'll just explain how these work. And finally, a couple of signposts where you can get some further information and further advice. So I think there are certain key points that I think everybody should remember from today's webinar. And those are listed on the slide, but safeguarding is based upon a large amount of legislation, but also in a lot of practical experience and the philosophy which recognises that safety of children in our society is of paramount importance. Key statutory guidance from government, such as working together to safeguard children, emphasise that effective safeguarding is achieved by putting children at the centre of the safeguarding system by every individual and agency playing their full part. This child-centred approach is fundamental to safeguarding and promoting the welfare of every child, and this flows through into our sectors too. Government guidance such as keeping children safe in education is regularly revised, and normally such guidance applies to all schools, whether state schools or otherwise, and links right back to other guidance like working together to safeguard children. It emphasises again that all those who have contact with children need to play their part effectively. A child-centred approach means that all should consider at all times what is in the best interest of children. Guidance also states, guidance like working together to safeguard children, also states that children have said, among other things, that what they need are the following. They need vigilance for adults to notice when things are troubling them. They need understanding and action to understand what's happening and to be heard and understood, and to have that understanding acted upon. They need support and advocacy, and they need protection. All this translates into a number of clear objectives on individuals working with children, and these extend to those who are self-employed as well. The themes are being observant, listening, supporting, and taking action. And all these are expressed in things like safeguarding and child protection policies and procedures, such as those that the ISM has, and all those found in schools or local authorities and in other environments. So in practical terms, if you're working in an organisational context with children, you need to find out who to go to in the event of any safeguarding matters arising. A good organisation will tell you who the person to report things to is, how to contact them, and will signpost you to the relevant procedures to follow. Make sure that you familiarise yourself with these. If you're working outside of an organisational context, you should make yourself aware of what you can do. This could be if you are self-employed, for example, working as a private music teacher. If you have concerns, if you're an ISM member working outside an organisation, we have procedures in place to tell you who to contact at the ISM. If you're a member of another similar body, you have, or you may have other guidance available to you from them too. ISM members also need to familiarise themselves with our various policies and procedures, and indeed it's a condition of your membership. We'll go through these in more detail later in this presentation. So often we hear about child protection as well as safeguarding, and there is a distinction between safeguarding and child protection, which in essence comes down to this. Safeguarding is an ongoing obligation, a practice which stems from the child-centred, proactively committed approach I described in the previous slide. It's about creating a framework through which risk is minimised by building support agencies with legal obligations, articulating the obligations on everyone to keep children safe, and creating an environment in which children feel that they will be safe and supported if they speak up. This means that you have to be prepared to speak up if you think something is wrong. On the other hand, child protection is about responding to specific incidents of harm when they arise. So child protection is reactive, safeguarding is proactive. I just wanted to give everyone a bit of background as well to the law relating to safeguarding and child protection. As someone who trained as a lawyer, we often talk about definitions. And so what do we mean by a child? Well, a child means anyone under the age of 18. And while 16 and 17-year-olds can be very grown up and can legally do lots of things, we would not classify them as adults in law. They're still considered as children until their 18th birthday. This should be remembered, but particularly by those working with young people of this age. So maintaining appropriate social boundaries is really important. All sorts of misunderstandings can and do arise from social relationships with young people in this age group, and you should avoid any conduct which would lead any responsible person or any reasonable person, to question your motivation and intentions. As I mentioned, there is a huge volume of legislation involved in safeguarding and child protection, and I'm not proposing to go through all of that today. However, I'd just like to draw your attention to a couple of key parts of the Children Act 1989. Section 1 of that Act states that when the courts are considering anything relating to the upbringing of a child, the safety of the child's welfare is paramount. And then section 47 of that Act is also important, as it places a duty on all local authorities to investigate in certain circumstances when they have received reports that a child is suffering or likely to suffer from significant harm. And these have given this Act has given rise to the general principle that for the rest of us, that the welfare of children is paramount. Good safeguarding practice and procedures in which time is of the essence are essential requirements in our response to that general duty. And governments across the UK have produced useful guidance on safeguarding, particularly for educators. So in England, one of these is called Keeping Children Safe in Education. The latest version was produced in 2022. And there is an update which will be coming into force in September this year. And it's essential that anyone working in an education setting, whether it's a state-funded school, a maintained school, or an academy, or an independent school, should read part 1 of Keeping Children Safe in Education. However, I would urge anyone working with children, even if you're a private music teacher, in whatever and in other contexts as well, to read this section of the document. The versions are on the gov.uk website, and the new version for September 2023 is also there as well. Keeping Children Safe in Education also says that all staff in schools and colleges should be aware of the process for making referrals to children's social care departments and for statutory assessments under the Children Act 1989, along with the role that they may expect to play in such assessments. Then there is another document in England, which is called Working Together to Safeguard Children, and that's again statutory guidance. And it's underpinned by the principle that everyone who comes into contact with children has a role to play in effective safeguarding, and that nothing is more important than trying to safeguard the welfare of children who need help and protection. These children deserve high quality and effective support as soon as the need is identified. As I said, those are documents which are in England, but there are similar documents in the devolved administrations as well. So in Scotland, the document there is called the National Guidance for Child Protection in Scotland. In Wales, the document is called Keeping Learners Safe. And in Northern Ireland, the document is called Safeguarding and Child Protection in Schools. So those are all documents that I would urge you to read if you are working with young people, children and young people in those parts of the country. And so everybody should be aware in working with children of indicators of abuse or neglect. It's worth remembering as well that children can be abused in a family setting or in an institution setting or in a community setting. and they can be abused by those known to them, or more rarely by others. Abuse can take place wholly online, or technology may be used to facilitate offline abuse. Children may be abused by adults, a single adult or several adults, or by another child, or by other children. So the main types of abuse are listed on this slide. So physical abuse, this can involve hitting, shaking, and other behaviours which cause physical harm to a child. Then there's emotional abuse, and this means a range of instances which can be summarised as the persistent emotional maltreatment of a child, such as to cause severe and adverse effects in the child's emotion. And this could include persistently shouting at children or belittling them and making them feel worthless. Sexual abuse is defined as forcing or enticing a child or a young person to take part in sexual activities, and that it doesn't matter whether the child is aware or not of what is happening, or that it is sexual in nature. And finally here, there is neglect as well. Neglect is defined, among other things, as the persistent failure to meet a child's basic physical or psychological needs, such that it results in serious impairment of that child's health or development. So you should look out for evidence of these sorts of things in your practice and in your dealings with children. And if you're concerned, tell someone straight away. Also think about the child's behaviour. Has it suddenly changed? Do they suddenly seem withdrawn or unusually distant? Are they showing any other unusual types of behaviours? These could be indicating that something is amiss. Listen actively, watch actively, and if you're concerned, draw it to the attention of those responsible in your organisation, or to an organisation such as the ISM if you're a member. It's better to say something rather than leave it and then something bad to happen. Normally we hear about things in the news when something serious has happened, and sometimes the upshot of it will be that somebody didn't say something at an early stage, or there wasn't a coordinated approach to it. So it's always better to say something rather than something bad happen. Hopefully, the previous few slides have been a bit of a useful background to safeguarding in child protection. We're now going to look at some of the things you can do in practice to promote good safeguarding. So first of all, I wanted to look at physical contact and the best practice in terms of physical contact with children. If you're employed or you work with an organisation, then always check their policy on physical contact with children. Failure to follow such a policy could lead to disciplinary action against you. It could lead to child protection referrals or contracts being cancelled. So if they haven't got a policy, ask somebody, ask what the policy on physical contact is with children, but make sure you know it. Our advice is that physical contact between musicians and music teachers and then children, their charges, is only appropriate in very limited circumstances. We say that you should try to avoid physical contact, and teachers should consider using other strategies, such as demonstrating fingering position, for example, for the student and getting them to copy that, or using a mirror for the student to see their own, how they maybe are holding an instrument. If a teacher intends to use any physical contact in their teaching, and this would I say particularly if you're a private teacher, you should state this in writing before lessons begin. And you should ask the parent or the guardian of the pupil to sign that they have read and understood the document, what you're going to be doing in terms of physical contact. You would also then need to keep the parent or guardian of the child informed if there's any need to modify the type of touch required, as pupils progress. We do say to everybody that it is not advisable in any to touch a child on the trunk of their body unless there is a justifiable reason, such as to administer first aid. And it is not appropriate to touch a child around the chest, waist, diaphragm, or ribs in order to teach breathing. Private teachers also need to be aware of the risks associated with teaching children alone, particularly when teaching is taking place in the home of the teacher or the pupil. In institutional settings, it's good practice to make it possible for another person to view the lesson from outside the room, for example, by using a room with a window in the door or teaching with the door open. But when teaching at home, we encourage teachers to ask parents or guardians either to sit in on lessons or to wait in an adjacent room with the door open while the lesson is taking place. And that's so that there can always be someone, whether you're in an institution or at home, there can always be someone watching what is going on. And teachers who are teaching at home as well should always provide information on who else might be in the house or premises where lessons are taking place. Turning to social media. Now, social media is a relatively new area when it comes to safeguarding, but we now live in a very connected age where even younger children can and do have social media presence and may want to invite you to follow them or be an online friend. Now, we would advise against ever connecting with children on social media. It's not appropriate and is not needed either as a teacher or a musician. We advise never to communicate with children using Twitter, Facebook, or any other social media. It's a huge area of risk and the scope for misunderstandings is massive. And any messages are also documented, so there will always be a record of your online conversations. Other than in exceptional circumstances, we also advise that you do not communicate directly with children by email or text message. And only, if you do have to communicate in those exceptional circumstances, only with the prior consent of the child's parent or guardian. If electronic communication is necessary, then in our view, best practice would be to communicate directly with their parent or guardian. And in effect, you don't need to communicate with children or young people directly. And lastly on this slide as well, there has been a growth in online teaching since the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns. Anyone needs to give careful consideration about how you teach online. We advise not to use your personal Zoom or Teams account, however you might be setting up your online lessons. We advise about set up a separate account for your professional career. So don't mix your personal Zoom account with your professional one. Password protect any meeting and also use the waiting room function that's on most platforms to stop unauthorized entry to any session. What you don't want is what was called Zoom bombing, which I'm sure some of us remember from the early part of lockdowns. Also, create a code of practice that you get parents or guardians to agree to that covers behavior during online lessons. This could cover things like appropriate clothing for the pupil to be wearing, or that pupils will be located in an area where they are supervised and not in their bedroom. This allows you to enforce that code of practice then. So if something happens, you can stop lessons and you can communicate that to parents. It's really important as well, everybody, to protect yourself from allegations of grooming and to be able to spot when grooming might be happening. You need to know what grooming looks like and what people consider to be grooming behaviour. The NSPCC, they define grooming as a situation where someone builds a relationship, trust and emotional connection with a child or young person so they can manipulate, exploit and abuse them. Children and young people who are groomed can be sexually abused, exploited or trafficked. And anybody can be a groomer, no matter their age, gender or race. Grooming can take place over a short or long period of time, from weeks to years. Groomers may also build a relationship with the young person's family or friends to make them seem trustworthy or authoritative. Children and young people can be groomed online, in person, or both, by a stranger or someone they know. This could be a family member, a friend, or someone who has targeted them. This could be a teacher, a faith group leader, or a sports coach. Therefore, it's really important that anyone working with children, whether as a music teacher or any other musical capacity, recognises that their professional relationships with children must always observe proper professional boundaries and values. This is for your own safety as well as that of the child. So be really careful of the matters, the things that are listed on this slide. What should you do if a child wants to make an allegation of abuse or disclosure of some kind to you? Well, the slide sets out steps which are standard guidance from organisations like the NSPCC. It's also what's included in the ISM safeguarding policies, and these steps should be followed if a child discloses anything to you. The key message for the child is that it is not their fault and that they are not to blame for whatever has happened. They should be reassured that they have a right to be safe and that they should not keep a secret about being hurt or feeling afraid. They don't have to deal with whatever they might be dealing with on their own, and that it is right for them to tell someone that they trust about what is happening. What's really important, though, is that you don't promise to keep anything that they say a secret. And you have to let the child know that you must share what they have said with others. It's really important that you make a note of the conversation that you have with the child, that you do that as soon as you finish talking to them. You might even be doing it while they're talking to you, but when they've finished, you should make sure you date it and sign it, and then you should report what that child has said to you. And we're going to turn to what you should do to report it on the next slide. So if you're in a place of work, school or other organisation, find out what the procedure is and follow it. All schools must have a member of staff who leads on safeguarding. In England, they are called designated safeguarding leads. In Scotland, they're called designated child protection leads. In Wales, they're called designated safeguarding person. And in Northern Ireland, they're a slightly different name as well. But if you can't find the person in the school who is the lead person for safeguarding, then tell the head teacher. If you're in a setting which is not in a place of work, if you're working independently, then you may need to contact the ISM for advice. If you're not a member of a professional body, then you can contact the NSPCC Child Protection Helpline, and I'll give you the number towards the end. They can advise you, and they can also make referrals to the local authority. You can find numbers for local authority child social care departments online, and most will have both an in-hours number and an out-of-hours service as well. If necessary, if it's an emergency, then contact the emergency services. This is particularly if a child is in any kind of immediate danger. But the real message here, everybody, is get any concerns that you have into the hands of professionals as quickly as possible. Tell somebody, don't conceal it, don't do nothing. Your obligation here is the safety of the child, and that in fact is a collective obligation on all of us. Sometimes allegations are made against individuals, against you. And so you need to know what happens if an allegation is made against you. Obviously, you should make sure, first of all, that your employer or anybody you're working for as a contractor knows that an allegation has been made. So you should tell people who you're working with, not everybody who you're working with, but a person in a position of responsibility. So that might be the designated safeguarding lead, or that might be the head teacher. But employers have a duty of care to employees, so they should have proper procedures in place to support you. And this may well involve being suspended from your duties. But try and find out what the procedures are and to make sure that you get the support that you need. You should also try and get professional advice if an allegation is made against you. And this could be an organisation like the ISM, and we do deal with things like this within our legal team, or you may need to get legal advice from elsewhere. As I say, if you're an ISM member, you should contact our legal team immediately, and our team will try and help you with your situation. But if you are an ISM member, under our own safeguarding procedures, our designated safeguarding person, me, will have to be notified of an allegation. And we'll come on to the process within the ISM a little bit later. I also wanted to cover today, just touch base on criminal records checks, because these are used to assess whether a person is suitable to work with children or vulnerable adults by looking at whether they have any criminal convictions, or if they appear on any barred list, or potentially if there's other information which is relevant to what they're doing. Whereas most people are subject to the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act, and that's an act which says that certain convictions become spent after a period of time, schools are exempt from that act, and they can obtain details of previous convictions. Now, there's a slightly different process across the country, so and that's described on the slide. But in England and Wales, checks are carried out by the Disclosure and Barring Service. And there are 4 levels of checks that can be undertaken. The basic check shows any unspent convictions and any conditional cautions. A standard check shows spent and unspent convictions and cautions. Thirdly, there's what's called an enhanced check, and that's the same as a standard check, but it also includes any information held by local police that is considered relevant to the role that is being applied for, or the role that the person is undertaking. This is often called soft information. So that's not conviction information, it's not caution information, but it might be that you were questioned by the police about a matter. And finally, the last one, the 4th one for DBS checks, is an enhanced check with a check on the barred lists as well. And that's the barred list to work with children, and there's a barred list to work with adults as well, vulnerable adults as well. So that's the additional thing which is done in that. And this is the check that will be done if you're going to be working in a school. Now, anybody can apply for a basic check, and that costs £18, but this is not sufficient if you want to work with children or vulnerable adults, because it only shows unspent convictions and conditional cautions. In terms of applying, if you're employed, then the employer applies for the check on your behalf. As I said, if you're going to be working in a school, that would be an enhanced check with the barred list being checked as well. If you're self-employed, then you can apply through the ISM for a DBS check. If you're a private teacher, we recommend that you have an enhanced check with the barred list check as well. And this is a requirement of the ISM's registered private teacher scheme. It takes about 4 to 8 weeks to fully complete the check, and we do it through an outside firm, and it costs £59.60. Now, the DBS check is only potentially as good as the day it is carried out. So it's a snapshot check. So within 30 days of a check, you can apply to be part of the update service. Now, the update service is where you pay £13 a year, and this is a continual check on your criminal record check and soft information. And then employers or potential employers can check the certificate online. In Scotland, those who work with children or vulnerable adults are required to join the Protection of Vulnerable Groups scheme, and this is managed by Disclosure Scotland. They also give out basics checks as well, Disclosure Scotland do, but that won't be sufficient for teaching children. Now, again, an employer applies on behalf of employees, or the ISM can do so on behalf of self-employed members. Cost here is £80.60. But the difference between that and the DBS check is that this is a continuous check. So once you join the Protection of Vulnerable Groups scheme, your records will be checked continuously, so there's no need for an update service. And then finally, in Northern Ireland, the criminal record checks are run by Access NI. Now, you're required to get a check if your work involves close or regular contact with children or vulnerable adults. And again, employers apply for employees, but the ISM can apply on behalf of self-employed musicians. Now, there's no update service in Northern Ireland, and there's no continuous check. And what ISM asks members to get a new check every 3 years in Northern Ireland, or indeed in England and Wales if you're not a member of the update service. The cost in Northern Ireland is £54.60. So I'm going to turn now and talk about the ISM policies, and many ISM members will have frequent contact with children in the course of their professional activities. And the ISM acknowledges that it has a responsibility to promote best practice and the highest standards of conduct among its members, and the ISM staff in relation to the safety of children. We also recognise that good safeguarding and child protection policies and procedures are a benefit to ISM members, as it can help protect you from misunderstandings or erroneous allegations. Now, we've developed these policies and procedures to help guide you in this practice, and also set up the expectations we have of members as professionals and members of a professional association. Now, our code of conduct covers a wide range of topics and includes a special section for private music teachers, which also addresses safeguarding matters quoted from during the course of this session. It's the practical guidance about physical contact or keeping doors open that are included in our code of practice. Our safeguarding and child protection policy, code of practice and procedures, sets out our general policy approach towards child protection, safeguarding, and specifically focuses on children. It also includes information on how to report any safeguarding concerns, and this policy must be followed and observed by all ISM members. The disciplinary procedure covers professional conduct and safeguarding issues, and the ISM has the right, in certain circumstances, to suspend or terminate someone's membership. You can find all these documents on our website by using the QR code that's on the slide. You can download them as PDF documents. You don't have to be a member to download them if you just want to see what they look like. Under our procedures, we require you to tell us, we require members to tell us if there's been any allegation or complaint or investigation arising from safeguarding or child protection issues. Once you've notified us, our legal team will try and help you and support you with any legal issues related to your employer or a contract. At the same time, though, they will need to notify me as the ISM designated safeguarding person. I will then notify the Chief Executive, and if necessary, the Chief Executive will refer the matter to the ISM Child Protection Committee. That's a committee made up of senior members of the ISM who also sit on ISM Council, but they decide what needs to happen next. In some cases, this may lead to suspension of benefits or potentially a disciplinary hearing if the matter is serious enough. Obviously, all this information is kept strictly confidential. It may be in these circumstances that member benefits may be suspended for a while pending an investigation, but they then can be restored if the investigation results in dropping of any allegations or claims made against that particular member. We also sometimes get complaints received from elsewhere about an ISM member, and in these circumstances, the designated safety-owned person, I'm informed, and will follow the same procedure as I outlined on the previous slide. I'll refer the complaint to the Chief Executive for further consideration, and the matter may be referred to the Child Protection Committee. If the matter requires legal support because, for example, an employer contacts us about a member, our legal teams will support the member during that part of the process as before. So for further information, I normally recommend to members of the ISM, but I'd say to all of you as well, contact the NSPCC, have a look at their website. Their website is continually updated, and it's an excellent resource for anyone needing to find relevant and up-to-date information on child protection and safeguarding. They have specific resources aimed at tutors, which are really useful resource for private music teachers. And they even have a course for tutors as well, a safeguarding course for tutors, which is low cost. It's £25. They also have a helpline, which I referred to earlier. If you're not a member of the ISM or if you're not a member of another professional body, you can ring the NSPCC Child Protection Hotline. The number is there, and they also have an email address. And on that number, they have trained counsellors and experts who can help. And as I say, they can make referrals as well to local authorities. So that's the end of the presentation today. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, then please feel free, if you haven't already, add them to the Q&A. Ruth is going to come back on in a second, and she's going to guide me through or ask me some of those questions. Hopefully I can answer most of them, but as I say, some of them might need a bit more consideration. I may well come back to you on those questions. But if you think of anything after this presentation, or if you're watching this presentation after it's taken place, then if there's anything that you want to ask, then do use the email address that's on this slide, and that's dsp@ism.org.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stuart. That was a great presentation, very informative, and hopefully everyone found it useful. So as Stuart mentioned, we've had some questions. We have had one live so far, but if you have any more questions that you want to ask, please do keep them coming through. We also had a few sent in advance, so I'll just run through those now. So firstly, Stuart, Sarah Wood has asked, what are the safeguarding procedures when teaching children who have visual impairments or are fully blind, such as appropriate teaching methods? So have you got any tips on that?
I suppose there's the general safeguarding thing, which you'll need to think about the needs of those particular children and their welfare. And as I said, the welfare of children is paramount in everything we do. So you might need to think about some of those additional needs when you're thinking about teaching children with visual impairments or blind children. A good starting place might be to look on the Amber Trust as well, who I know do a lot of resources about teaching children with visual impairments and blind children. So that might be another place to look to get some more tips about what you might have to do in terms of your practice. But all of the things that I think I've said today will still apply in terms of thinking about physical contact. You'll still want to make sure that you've got parents aware of what you're doing. You'll probably want to have somebody in the room with you as well when you're teaching, to make sure that that there's that independent person, if you like, but a third person, another adult who can witness what's going on. And if you're a private teacher, I think probably having the parent or the guardian in the room is probably the best strategy there, to make sure that they can assist you if necessary, but also to make sure that they're fully aware of what's going on.
Okay, thank you. We've had another anonymous question about DBS checking. So someone's asked or said that they have a DBS as a community choir leader of choirs for adults with a learning disability, but their volunteers who support the members do not have a DBS, and they were told this wasn't a legal requirement. Do you think this is true? And if they do need a DBS, is it free?
So I know that charities can normally get DBSs done for no charge because they're charities. I would most definitely go onto the DBS website, which is part of gov.uk, but I go on and check the specific requirements as well, because there are, in certain circumstances, you definitely need a DBS, and in other circumstances, you might not need a DBS. So Ruth said at the start that for many years I was a trade union official for a teachers' trade union. I wasn't required to have a DBS check, even though I was going into schools. That's partly because I was never left unsupervised with children, but those weren't circumstances that required a DBS. So I would most definitely go and have a look on the DBS website specifically to look at whether there's the requirement for everybody to have it. And if you feel that there is, and it might be best practice to have the DBS check in place for everybody, look to see whether you can't get that for no cost, because you're a charity and you're doing that as a means of best practice and protecting the vulnerable adults that you work with.
Great, thank you. We also had a question from someone asking if there are any online safeguarding courses for community musicians who work with vulnerable adults. Are you aware of any? I'm not aware of any directly. There are, if you do a bit of Google searching, there are safeguarding courses, particularly for those who might be working in the care sector. There are those safeguarding adults courses out there. You'll have to assess, and I'd have a look at several providers before you make a decision about maybe which one you want to give some money to, because ultimately there'll be a charge to them. But there are courses out there specifically designed for safeguarding vulnerable adults, and like I say, they're normally surrounding working in the care sector, that sort of thing. But if you do a bit of searching, they are out there. Great, thank you. And someone asked, are there any differences between Scotland and England? So I know we've covered this in part already, but if you can maybe just give us a summary.
Yeah, there's that difference in terms of certainly with schools and to a degree local authorities as well, because certain matters are devolved to the Scottish government, and so they don't follow things like keeping children safe in education and working together to safeguard children. They have their own documents. So I mentioned the name of those, and it's gone off the top of my brain. I really apologise, but if you look back over the recording, you'll be able to see what it's called. They have their own document in schools. In essence, the premises are the same, though. You know, if something happens and you've got a concern about it, or if a child says something to you and you've got a concern about it, make sure you report it to somebody. So if you're in an organisational setting, make sure you go to that person who is the designated child protection lead in Scotland. So go and talk to them about it. If you can't find them, go and speak to the head teacher if you're in a school. If you've got a concern and you're working independently, the local authorities in Scotland will have child social care departments as well, like the ones in England, like the ones in Wales, and what have you. They will have those departments, and they will have numbers that if you're concerned. The NSPCC as well is a nationwide organisation. So ultimately, if you've got something that concerns and you your out of hours for the ISM, if you're an ISM member. If you can't find the local authority number, ring the NSPCC helpline, because they'll be able to help you. But all the premises are the same. If you see something, or if a child tells you something, make sure you report it, record it and report it.
Great, thank you. We had a suggestion from someone in the chat. So Martha said that Penny Rogers does fantastic training, and she's an ex-music therapist, which may be useful for vulnerable adults. So that's Penny Rogers, Rogers. So we've had a couple more questions through in advance. Somebody said, you mentioned no gifts. I give Christmas cards to all my students, and often a card to say well done if they pass an exam. Is this allowed?
It's allowed, I'd say, if you're giving the card to the parent and making sure the parent is aware of it. So I don't know, when the parent the parent may well be at the lessons, or the guardian of the child is at the lesson, and it's Christmas, or they passed the exam, give the card and make sure you're giving it to the parent, so the parent's aware. What you've got to be careful, of course, is that inappropriate relationship with the child themselves. And so everything, this is why we say don't communicate with the children, because that can be misinterpreted. Don't do anything which can be misinterpreted as you trying to form a relationship with the child. Your relationship as a teacher should be with the parent. Ultimately, they're who's paying you as well. So that's the relationship that you should want. If you want to praise the child through giving them a card or a Christmas card or something like that, make sure it's with the parent. You're giving it to the parent, so the child still gets the benefit, but the parent is receiving it.
Great, thank you. Somebody also asked, I'm self-employed and teach privately at home, not in a school. Do I have to do a safeguarding training course? And if so, can you recommend any training for me? I know we've talked a little bit about courses for community musicians, but more for sort of the private teaching side of things. Is there anything you'd recommend?
I think there's not that there's not a legal requirement, I would say. I think there's a best practice. I think, as I said, I think ISM members who are private teachers, we always say get a criminal records check done. So get the DBS, get the PVG, or get the XSNI check done. You can do it through the ISM. There are some, and then you can show that to parents as well, so that parents are aware that you've got it and you've got it in place. And there's also the ISM's registered private teacher scheme as well, which you can join if you're an ISM member. I would say there is the NSPCC safeguarding for tutors. There's a specific page where they give guidance, but they also do a specific training course as well. And the cost is £25 for that. So that might be something that people who are private tutors may well want to look into as well.
Great, thank you. And then finally, somebody said, at my school, I have to attend compulsory safeguarding training, but I'm not paid for my time. Is this allowed? Interesting question. Yeah,
I think it's a question we get asked a lot in the ISM legal team. So thank you to whoever wrote that. You will often get where if you work in a school where they say you must attend safeguarding training every year, and they run it. And indeed, most school teachers do, and school staff, not just teachers, but school staff do refresher training every year on safeguarding. What I would say is I'd always say check the contract that you might have with the school. What does that say about training? If it's silent, then if it's compulsory, my argument would be always you should be paid for attending that training. Shouldn't be included in your hourly rate, for example, that you get just when you're teaching. So I'd go and ask and say, if it's compulsory, you ought to pay me for the hours that I'm doing it, or the hour maybe that I'm doing it. And yeah, if you're an ISM member and the school say, no, we're not paying you for it, come and take some advice and we should be able to help.
Brilliant. Okay, I don't think we've had any further questions. So in that case, we will finish the webinar, and it just leaves it to me to say thank you very much to Stuart for that valuable overview of safeguarding for musicians. And thank you to all of you for joining us. I very much hope you found the session informative and useful. And if you have any further questions, you can email Stuart at dsp@ism.org, or you can email our membership team on membership@ism.org. Please do fill in our post-webinar survey, which you can find in the chat, and it will also be emailed out to you afterwards. We really appreciate your feedback. As I said, it helps us to improve our services and offer more free professional development to musicians. And the webinar recording will be sent out to all of you by email, and it will be available to watch on our website for free. And we'll also send you some useful links that we've shared during this webinar, plus some information about other upcoming ISM Trust webinars, which includes an introduction to music production on the Tuesday, the 11th of July at 5 p.m, and a webinar on Ofsted music in schools on Thursday, the 21st of September at 4 p.m. So finally, it just leaves me to say thank you again for watching, and we very much hope to see you at another ISM Trust event soon. Thank you. Goodbye.